In this tutorial, we're going to cover Adobe Illustrator Classroom in a Book, Chapter 7, which is all about creating different types of color. So here you can see we've got our different palette, different ways to color things. So let's go ahead and open up our Start file and do a file, Save As. And let's call it L7 Art Poster. And save. Alright, so there's a lot of different things we're going to look at in this chapter. Things like CMYK, which is cyan, magenta, yellow, black, which is when we use pigment in order to create color on paper, or RGB, which is red, green, blue, light, for things like screens. So let's go ahead and take a peek at what we've got. We're going to see there's quite a few different things we're going to play with in here. We've got traditional methods of coloring, which is also called painting in Illustrator. And we're going to explore the properties and swatches and color pickers and a number of different ways to create color. So let's go ahead and apply an existing color. So let's grab our selection tool and hit the red box on this background. Let's go ahead and go to our properties, and we can see here our fill is set to that kind of burgundy red color. We're going to double click it and come down to this color right here, Sign BG, and change it to Sign BG so we get kind of that cool blue as our background instead. So that's using a pre-existing color to create that color. So how do we create a custom color? There's quite a few different ways to do that. Let's go ahead and hit Escape and select Out so that we're not on the background anymore. Let's go ahead and grab this first color blob on our palette, and let's go to our fill. Click here, and let's grab that palette, which is going to give us our color mixer option, which is going to reveal those CMYK colors. So let's go ahead and click on kind of this greenish color. We want it to be kind of a cool green. So we can either do it from the color picker, or if we want to create something that's more exact, maybe we've got colors we've got to match, we can actually put those CMYK numbers in. So for C, we're going to put 52. For magenta, it's 0. For yellow, let's bump up to 100, and for black, let's leave it at 0. So now we've got our color here. So colors created in the color mixer are not saved anywhere unless you turn them into a swatch somewhere along the way. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and come back up here to our swatches, and we want to be able to use this green again. So let's come here to the post-it note and hit the New Swatch button. So now it's going to say, okay, what do we want to call it? Let's call it light green. And we want to make sure this Add to My Library is not selected, because it's not something we're going to use over and over again. And we want to go ahead and leave global, because that allows us to change things. It's kind of like a style on the fly. And let's say okay. So now if we go to our swatches, we see that light green one is highlighted in our swatches, and it's got a corner cutoff, which lets us know that it is a global color. So if we change it, it's going to change every place that color is. So with this shape still selected, let's go ahead and create a copy of a swatch. Let's go here to our fill and go ahead up to our hamburger menu, and we want to duplicate the swatch. So when we duplicate it, you see now we have a light green and we have a light green copy. So let's go ahead and come down here, selection tool, to our next one down, our next blob, and let's put the swatch copy on there. So let's go here to swatch copy. So it's the same color right now, but we're actually going to edit those color settings so it's not two greens side by side. So in our swatch options, we're going to go ahead and double click it, and let's change it to orange. And our cyan is 6. You can hit tab to go in between. Our magenta is 51, yellow is 89, and black is 0. So you get kind of a funky orangish color. And let's go ahead and say yes global. We can preview it so we can see it's changing both things at once, which we don't necessarily want. So let's go make sure this one is actually applied to be that light green, and this one is the orange copy. So when we're editing those global swatches, we can, decide, I don't like this orange, it's really awful. Let's go ahead and go into these global swatches, let's grab our select, let's grab this next ellipse down, go to our fill box, grab up our properties, and let's create a new swatch. And this one's going to be called pink. And global is selected. Our cyan is 5. Magenta is 100. Yellow is 60. And black is 0. So we're going to get kind of a neat pink color and say OK. So now we've got that pink color. So if we notice, that swatch popped up in our gray folder because gray was what the object was before we started creating it. So we can actually move it. Just click and drag pink, and let's drag it up over next to some of our other colors so we keep our grays together. Alright, let's go ahead and grab our selection tool and hit this ruler, and let's make the ruler the new swatch called pink. So if we go to swatches, let's grab this one called pink. So now we've got 2 pink things. So let's go ahead and change our pink a little bit. So if we double click the swatch name pink, we can change it. Let's bump our yellow up to or down to 30. So we're going to take a bunch of the yellow out and say OK. So now notice that the pink changed colors because we had that global swatch. So any place that is applied, it's going to change everywhere that we go. So it's really nice when you're trying to be consistent with colors from one place to another. Alright, let's go ahead and go back to grab our background and see what happens when you edit a non-global swatch. So that background we had, that sign background, let's go ahead and make it one of these greens instead. Maybe this one that's cyan 75. Yeah, let's go with that one. So it's going to make that as well. And it's not a global swatch. It does not have that white corner missing. So let's deselect. So if we go to Window and Swatches, it's already open. So we've got our swatches here. Let's go ahead and, oops, I closed it. In that color, let's double click it. And let's rename it Background. And let's adjust it so it's cyan 80, magenta 10, yellow 45, and black is 2. You can always do preview and say OK. So if you notice, the background color did not change even though we changed that color itself because it wasn't a global color. So let's go ahead and select that background shape again, and now go back in and go to that new background swatch we just created. So let's go over here. It should be named background when you scroll over. So now we get that new color that we just created and applied it again. So how can we use the color picker in order to create color? Let's go ahead and do a Control S to save what we've got so far. Let's grab our selection tool and grab the next paint blob on our palette. And let's go ahead and use the color picker. So when we use the color picker, we do things like go over here to our fill color, double click, and we get that field of color which allows us to choose different types of colors. So this time we want to choose kind of a blue. So I can either guess my blue, or once again I can go in and put my CMYK in. So cyan 90, magenta 15, yellow 0, black 0. So now I've got a new color of blue. But once again, it's not going to be permanent unless I make it into a swatch. So my color's there. Let's hit the post-it for a new swatch. And let's call it blue. And we want it to be a global color. We do not want to add it to our library. And we're going to say OK. So now if you look at that color group, we now have that new one called blue. So let's talk about these swatch libraries and what we can do with them. Let's go to Window and go all the way here to the bottom and we want to grab this one called Swatch Library. So sometimes we wanted to work with things like Pantone colors. Pantone colors, also called spot colors, are colors that are used universally by different printers to ensure that you will get the same color from producer, printer to printer. So let's go ahead and go to Window, and let's grab Color Books. So we've got Swatch Libraries, go up to Color Books, and we want to go ahead and grab Pantone Solid Coated Library. So depending on how you're painting or how you're using what paper affects what types of colors and how those colors look on different types of things. So we're assuming that this is a solid, that we're going to coat it, which means we're going to have some type of gloss on it, which is going to change your color. We want to go ahead and get color 100 or 137. Before I do this, I want to make sure I've deselected this, otherwise we're going to turn our blue blob into a yellow blob, which I don't want. So let's change it to 137. So now you see we've got a couple of different things that pop up. So we don't have to run through all those bazillion colors for Pantone. So let's go ahead and double click that one. And we can now add it. If you see right here, it's added to your Swatch library, and you can tell it's a Pantone, it's a spot color because it's got a little dot right there. So let's go ahead and look at this pencil down here. Let's do a shift click and grab all three parts of that pencil. Let's grab our fill, and let's grab that Pantone yellow color. Let's go ahead and just select all, or deselect, and do a Control S to save. So now we want to save a tint of a color. So wouldn't it be nice if this kind of had a little bit of a different color to it? So rather than try and make a new color, we want to make a tint of a color. So we're going to go with our selection tool. We're going to pick just the middle section. We're going to come up here to our fill box, and we're going to click on it, and we want that color mixer, that color palette to come up. And we don't want the full color, we want part of it. So let's go ahead and put 70 in instead. So now we're going to get a tint of that color. So if we come here to our swatch, you see we now have a new swatch that is a slightly lighter color. You can see it here in your pencil. So let's go ahead and make sure we add it as a new swatch. So now if you see side by side, I've got my kind of my dark yellow pencil color and my lighter yellow pencil color. So it can save you a lot of money when you use different tints of a color, because that way you get the impression of a lot of colors without having to use a lot of different kinds of inks. Let's do a Control S and say what we've got so far. So how do we convert colors? There's quite a few different things we can do in order to change colors around. Depending on the profile, sometimes you might have RGB, maybe you have CMYK, maybe you're working with Pantone. You might want everything to be all of one color style. If you don't, sometimes you get errors. It'll say that you're having color profile matching problems. And you can fix this as you go along. So let's go ahead and do a select, and do a select all on active artboard. Alright, so we want to go to Edit. We want Edit Colors. So down here toward the middle. And we want to convert to CMYK. Which means now we have converted that Pantone into a CMYK color. So we won't have as many issues of compatibility. Alright, let's go ahead and change some appearance attributes. Let's make sure we don't have anything selected. So select and deselect. So we don't have anything, otherwise there's a chance we'll recolor something we don't want to. Let's grab our selection tool and grab that last ellipse. Let's go ahead and grab that eyedropper tool over in our tools panel. Right now I've hidden it somewhere. And where did I put it? Here's eyedropper. Alright, so we've got our eyedropper, and we want to click on the orange, the darker of those colors. So now those two are going to match. So kind of like you can in Photoshop, you can drop colors and select it that way. So let's go ahead and click on the stroke color in our properties panel and change it to none. Because we did the eyedropper, it brought that stroke along with it, which we don't necessarily want. Alright, let's do a Control S and save what we've got so far. Oh, undo. I did undo instead of save. Alright, so let's go ahead and click out and call it good. Alright, so let's create some color groups. So maybe you want to be able to organize your colors. You've got too many going on. You want to be able to put them in these little tiny folders, which makes it a lot easier to be an organized designer. So let's go ahead and bring up our swatches folder. If you don't have it, it's Windows and Swatches. Let's click on the one that we had assigned background, remember, and then hold Shift and come here to the one that we created that was called blue. So we're going to collect those 5 color swatches. We want to put them together in a group. If we look down here at the bottom, we've got the file folder called New Color Group. We're going to name that new color group Palette Colors, because that is our artist palette and the colors we have on there. And push OK. So now you'll see it is in its own folder. So when we want to go find just those colors, we can, because we've now put them into a color group. And we can still edit each of those independently. So let's look at our different colors we've got. Let's grab our selection tool and deselect everything in the panel. So click over here. Want to make sure we don't have all of them selected. What can we do with it now? Let's go ahead and drag that background color, the sign background, that first one. You notice you can drag them up and down within your palettes themselves. So you can drag, maybe you decide you really want to have this color in this pencil wood color brought down as well. You've got options as to how you're going to create and organize those color groups. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and put my sign background back where it was and click out and do a Control S to save what I've got so far. So what else can we do? Let's go ahead and change artboards. I'm going to come down here and I want to change my active artboard to the one that says 2 pencils 1. So we've got these pencils we're going to color with now. So let's go to Window and come down to Color Guide. And you're going to see we've got a different bunch of colors that are already built here. This color guide provides you with color inspiration and makes it a little bit easier as a designer to figure out what you want to do. So let's grab our selection tool and click on the dark green part of the image that we've got here. So let's grab and set this to our new base color. So we want to set our base color to the new color. So notice when we did that, we got a totally different set of colors based on what we had chosen as our base color. So what do we want? Let's go ahead and do this drop down here, and let's grab the one that says analogous. So now we've got several different colors that match and make our life a little bit easier to decide what we're going to do. So let's go ahead and maybe we don't like these colors. Maybe we want to choose it based on something else. Maybe we want a darker green instead. There's a lot of different harmony groups you can choose from, obviously. So let's go ahead. We decide we do like this one. It's pretty cool. Let's go ahead and go to the swatches panel. And I didn't get it there. So let's go back to the color picker, color guide. And we want to save the color group right here at the bottom of our color guide. Save it to the swatches panel. So now when I go into the swatches panel, I now have that set of greens to choose from. So I'm going to go ahead and deselect all, do a Control S and save what I've got. So in that color guide, let's go back into our color guide, it's a little fan. Let's go ahead and pick a different color green. So let's go like, what is it? 4th row down, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th one in, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So it's kind of a bright green. And use that as the base color. Now we have to make sure that when we did this, we didn't have this selected, otherwise it would have changed the color of our green pencil, which we don't necessarily want. Alright, so let's look at some other options. Let's go to our drop down, and this time let's grab Triad 2. So now we get some different colors that we didn't necessarily have before. Let's save that group as well to our swatches panel. Let's go into our swatches panel and see, now that you've got that analogous and you've got that triad group that we didn't have before. So what else can we do? We can actually change and play with these color groups and edit them when they are within those groups. So let's click on this bottom one, this bottom color group. So click on the folder, and we want to do edit color group. So we're going to grab that pinwheel down here at the bottom, and it's going to pop open a file for us with a couple of different options. So the first thing we want to do is name this color group. Let's call it pencil colors. So now what else can we do? We want to see how this looks on the color wheel itself. So you can change your segmented color wheel. You can see it side by side. You can see there's a few different ways to look at that within our options. Let's go ahead and see what happens when you move these around. So notice they all change together based on your choices that you make within these elements. So let's go ahead and make it so, let's bring this down a little bit more to the blue, maybe that over there a little bit. So we've got different color markers depending on how you move them in and out, changes the saturation, and adjusts your color palette accordingly. So let's grab right here, you've got that brightness and darkness, so we get a whole different range of colors, and let's go ahead and make it a little bit brighter. And notice how it's changing all of the colors at once. We can change just one color at a time. So if you go over to the link and click on it, now you get dotted lines, and it's going to allow you to change single colors within that color scheme. So you've got to make sure it's unlinked if you want to touch just one. So what else can we do? Let's click on that color mode icon, which is right down here, and make sure we're on CMYK. That's going to pop up this for us, and maybe we want to specify exactly what color we want that marker to be. So for cyan we're going to say 29, for magenta 80, for yellow we need 100, and for black we need 28. So now we've got kind of a different color, brown, which you'll notice is now in our color group that we didn't have before. So let's make sure we save those. So we need to save our changes to the color group. So this was our previous color group. This is our color group now. So make sure you're saving those changes to the color group. So now our pencil colors have changed color. If you wanted to, we can go back in, change those colors again, make it more red, save the color group once again. Let's go ahead and do it. Close this, say OK, and do a Control S and save what we've got. So how do we edit colors? Well, we could go through and do it one at a time, or we can have Illustrator do the work for us. Let's do a select, and let's select all on the active artboard. And let's go over here to recolor. So when we do recolor, we get to dynamically change the way the objects are looking. So right now on the side you've got this hide or show color group. Let's go ahead and hide it for now so you can see a little bit more of the artwork. And let's go ahead and get colors from the artwork. So let's go ahead and click here. So it's actually going to pull the colors from the artwork that we have right now. And we want to edit them. So let's go ahead and change it to edit. We're going to make sure that our link is turned off so that we can do them independently of one another. So the lines should be dotted in between. So let's look at the display color bars so you can see them one at a time. So let's click on that first orange bar to select it, And let's bump that magenta in that orange bar up just a little bit to 100. So it's going to make that orange just a little bit darker, and look, now our orange pencil has turned red. So we're doing this dynamically without having to go through and change all these individual elements of our image. So let's go ahead and click the second one, and let's do a right click and do select shade. When we do select shade, it lets us choose part of that color. So let's go ahead and come over here to kind of a orangey kind of color, and we're going to say OK. We're just going to click out of it, so we've got that one. So you can edit the bars, you can do things individually. Notice when we change that bar, it changed the shade of that part of the pencil right there. So maybe I want to make it, I can still color, I can still play with it. I don't feel like messing with it right now. So once I'm good with it, I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to click out and deselect what I've got so far and do a Control S to save. So let's go ahead and switch artboards again and switch up to our number 3, Pencils 2, which has got 3 pencils on it. And let's do a select all on active artboard, and let's pick recolor once again. So let's look at our color groups. So we're going to do that expansion right there. And we want to go ahead and look at what our different color groups are. We want to go ahead and grab the one called Pencil Colors that we created earlier. So look what happens when we do Pencil Colors. We've actually changed it based on the colors that we've chosen there. But some of them are kind of gross. What happened to my wood here? It looks kind of weird. So I'm going to go to my second one down, my creamy color, and hit the arrow that says do not change it into that cream. Or keep it the cream. I don't want you to change that at all. So what else can we do? We can tell it not to change. So that's what we did right now. So we said do not change. Does not have the arrow. So what if we don't like the order? We can actually take and move these bars up and around and saying if it's one of these colors, make it this instead. So that's what we've got going on now. And we can also say if it is this color, make it something else. So let's go ahead and grab that in our new column. Grab our yellow. See, look, you can look at our yellow. And we can go ahead and drag it down on top of the blue and release it. So now we have changed anything that were the green colors before are now kind of a yellow. So it's one really easy way to reassign colors, to recolor without having to go through and do a whole lot of extra work. So let's go ahead and look at our burgundy color. It's kind of our reddish color. And let's drop this yellow. Let's move it up to 100. And click out. So we can change that color just a little. So we can change that show color. And we want to make sure we're saving those colors. So now we've changed that red just a little bit. So save the colors to the color group. And we're going to say OK to accept those color changes from our previous. Let's do a Control S and save what we've got already. The next thing we're going to work with is Live Paint. Live Paint lets you paint vector graphics pretty intuitively. It's kind of the same idea as coloring in a coloring box. Kind of a similar way to how the paint bucket works in Photoshop. So let's go ahead and grab Live Paint. And what we're actually going to be making here is this rainbow with the paintbrush. So how are we going to do that? We're going to go ahead and grab our selection tool. With our selection tool, we're going to select over where we want to put those rainbow of colors. We want to grab the Live Paint bucket, which is under the Shaper. So it's under the Shape Builder tool. You want the Live Paint bucket tool. Over here in Fill, let's go ahead and tell it what color we want to do first. So let's go ahead and grab that one called Light Green. So up here, that light green that we made at the very beginning. And let's position our pointer over our selection. And notice how it is clicking to making a live paint group. So I can click over into that section. Once it's created, those paths are fully editable, but they're still treated as a group, and colors are automatically reapplied as you move and adjust those elements. So we can actually change, overlap these, play with it, and it'll make it a little bit different. All right, so let's go ahead and go over our next section. And a red highlight's going to appear to let us know where we're at. Let's go ahead and hit the right arrow key, and it lets you see how it lets you change what colors you're on. I want to make sure I get my orange, so I'm going to come down here to my fill as orange and click in here and get that orange color as well. So now I want the pink, so I'm going to go ahead and go here to my fill, come down to that pink that we made, and grab my paint bucket, my pink selected, and come on over here. And the next one I want to make is blue, so I'm going to use that right arrow. I'm switching, you see how you switch the colors around, and go ahead and slick the blue. Alright, so one of the next things we want to do is be able to color the strokes. So we want to get rid of these 3 extra pieces down here. So we want to be able to color those elements. So let's double click our live paint bucket tool and hit paint strokes if it's not clicked already, and say OK. So let's go ahead and go to our stroke box. In our stroke box, we want to go ahead and change it from a color to none. We're then going to take and we can hit escape and close that out. We want to roll over those extra lines. We get a paintbrush, and we can now click on it with the paintbrush and turn it into no stroke as well. So let's talk about modifying a live paint group. Let's make sense of what we're talking about. Why does it matter? Let's go ahead and grab our selection tool and grab these couple sections. Nope, I just want the bottom sections. Let's go ahead and grab the base of the paintbrush and the handle. And let's go to Object and come down to Live Paint, and we want to make. So we want to make this a live paint area. So with the selection tool, we're going to go ahead and let's select our, and just grab our live paint. So let's grab our live paint bucket. Let's make sure we're coloring with a kind of, well, it's kind of a color gray. Let's go to darker gray. And let's go ahead and click in paint in this section right here. So we're going to paint that section darker. So one of the next things we're going to do is select that white object and bring it down closer. So you can see, kind of see how they overlap. So we've got that overlap section. So let's go ahead and select all and do a object and a live paint and make. And it ends up so we can actually change these individual sections as we go along. So let's double click on this white section right here. And you can change it to kind of a dark gray, light gray. You can move it to the back. So we can do arrange, send to back. Bring this one forward. A few different things we can do with our live paint situation. So let's go ahead and escape that. And depending on how these are working, which I didn't get it to work quite right, you can change the size, make it do different things. Let's go ahead and select this little overlapping section right here, and let's give it a fill of maybe even a darker gray. And I ended up painting the whole thing gray, which I don't want to do. Undo. Let's go ahead and grab a selection tool, and for now I'm just going to put this right there and play with it a little bit more, maybe. So now the next thing I want to do is grab my paint bristles. So I need to go to Object and Show All, and there's my paint bristles. So I can grab my selection tool and move my paintbrush up a little bit and create my paintbrush. So I'm going to do a Control minus take a peek. And these are a lot of different ways you can create color in Adobe Illustrator. Make sure you do Control S, and that is all for this one.